Hi, go ahead.
Okay, if we're all set. Nicole, I guess we're having this meeting because we neglected to do something at our last meeting. If you could describe what we neglected to do and then maybe have the internal auditors chime in and have them describe what they're asking us to do, that'd be great.
Certainly. So our internal auditors were unable to come to our last meeting. And when I was presenting the cycles, the committee selected a cycle that we've already done. So they're just going to briefly present the cycle. So, and when I speak to that, I'm talking about like cash management, revenue, grants. Those are the cycles. I sent those out in an email previously last month, but they're going to present to you just briefly what's outstanding. And then I anticipate a motion to approve one of those cycles to continue on our process of the internal audit, and then we can wrap it up. So Carl or Corey, please proceed.
Sounds good. Thanks, Nicole. Good evening, everybody. So to get to the point, we are at a position where the district is looking to select their second cycle for detail testing. So I think what would be useful in this meeting is we come on and we could let you know the history of what cycles have been tested and when. So with that, I'm going to bring up just a quick table here that shows what we call a rotation schedule. Everybody seeing that? A listing of each of the cycles. Dan,
Yes.
If you're on your phone, you may have to shift around. Not sure how.
Yeah, I've got it and I'm moving around.
Okay.
So I'm good.
To cut to the chase, we put an X here to show what cycles have been detail tested each of the last 6 and the first cycle of this year, fiscal years, during the internal audit. That said and shown, there are 3 cycles that we would pick out as our top recommendations for what the board or the committee would consider for selecting this year for a second. First would be, and this is in no particular order, extra classroom was last tested, fiscal year ended 2018. This is an area that, just due to the student involvement, it tends to carry a little bit of a higher risk. Also, oftentimes there's the opportunity for an increased activity as it relates to handling cash, physical cash. Along with cash comes opportunity for stuff you wouldn't want, right? We haven't heard any issues or encountered any issues during the risk assessment procedures that we look at extra classroom each year. But in other districts, they have perceived this as a riskier area. So it hasn't been tested in the last 4 years. So we thought we would include that in the proposed cycles for testing. Next would be food service. And that is taking a look at, really all the ins and outs of your food program, cafeteria program. We would work with the manager, typically like a cafeteria manager. And we also take a look at the handling of inventory in that area. Inventory being, of course, food inventory and how they handle that, count everything, account for everything to see that things aren't walking off. Also to see that things aren't sticking around for too long. Being smart with the ordering of food, but also taking a look at the tracking of equipment that's used in the kitchen and the cafeteria. That item has not been tested since we have been hired as the district's internal auditors. So previous to 2016, I'm unsure if it was included, but at least in recent history, that has not been tested. And then the final one that we would include is definitely the largest of the ones that we would recommend, and that is the purchasing, accounts payable, and disbursement cycle. Obviously, just inherently purchasing, accounts payable, disbursements is part of virtually every department's operations at the district. So rather pervasive maybe the most pervasive other than district policies and procedures. In that cycle, we would take a look at the purchasing policy itself, kind of do a rundown of making sure that it's updated for best practices. We did take a look at that during policies and procedures back in 2019, but we would revisit that step. We would also take a look at purchases, take a larger sample of purchases throughout many departments and look for compliance to the district's purchasing and procurement policy, including bidding procedures as well. Another area in that cycle that we would look at is the maintenance of your vendor listing to see what does it take to become part of the vendor listing. Essentially, do they go through some sort of review process before they're recognized as a vendor that the district is going to do business with? There is a minimum amount of sort of vetting, if you will, of certain vendors that we would want to see before you would move forward, writing checks to them and doing business with them. And finally, a little check on the accrual testing, and that's the accounts payable side of things to see that the general ledger, the reporting as of the fiscal year end, June 30th, is accurate for the district's audited financial statements. I heard a chime. I'm unsure if that is that a notification for a question, or did someone maybe just join?
No, that was me rejoining. I apologize.
Oh, no problem. No problem. Just want to make sure. So that is what we have as recommendations this year. If anybody had questions of what we've done, or maybe other cycles, or further questions on those three recommendations, we're here and available.
And just so I clarify, you're looking for us to select 2 for the balance of this year. Is that correct?
That it is just the second. The first cycle that was tested just in November was the athletic cycle. So we've completed 1 of 2. We're looking for the second one only. So
Okay.
just 1 cycle.
So just pick one.
Mhm.
Does anybody have any comments, question other than the ones I've already asked?
Just have a quick
Well,
question.
go ahead.
Okay, I just noticed that cash management and revenues are not tested. Are they just not tested because they're sort of blank along your lines too? Is that?
So I could speak on those. Good point. Cash management first typically it's covered in our risk assessment procedures every year, because the way that you handle cash pops up in all these other cycles. So cash management on its own, we don't really deem worthy for selection of detail testing. We don't think it would be the greatest value to the district. On the revenue side of things, kind of goes hand in hand with grants. Grants pops up as its own cycle here because it was noted as a significant area back in 2017. There was some turnover in the position that was the main employees handling grants. But revenue, unless there's a specific source of revenue that the district has a concern with, overall, we don't believe it to present as much of a value as these other cycles do as far as detail testing. We do look at cash receipts and different revenue sources every year during that overall risk assessment. So we do touch on them, but outside something coming to our attention, which we would communicate, nothing has. And if any of the audit committee didn't have a specific concern that would fall under revenue, those typically wouldn't be selected for detail testing.
Carl, if I could just jump in there, if I think about the school district's revenue, what little I probably know, but if I think about state aid, sales tax, property tax, I've probably covered 90% of it.
Correct.
And probably the externals do confirmations on most of that. So I'm probably not using you to your highest and best use. I mean, even though there's a lot of money in that group, we know what it is almost from day one.
Correct.
Food service was one of the choices.
Yes.
Now, Nicole, isn't the district operating the second year in an unusual place with food services? So it probably wouldn't be a good idea to audit that until it goes back to normal, right?
So, I mean, you can certainly do that. With the single audit, which is the federal grants, get audited by our external auditors, and they select, much like the cycles, they select different grants year over year. So they did select school lunch for the 2021 audit. So they did the audit. Now this year, like as you said, David, is a little different because we're doing tick sheets, which is basically a count of student lunches to be reimbursed, which is looked at. So there's not as rigorous of a process. There's not a lot of cash handling because we're only selling snacks, and we only started that midway through the year just because of everything that was happening with COVID. So it may not be as what's the word?
Not as beneficial to.
Yeah,
audit.
it wouldn't be as beneficial as the audit. Yeah. So the other thing is we've had an issue getting food and supplies in. So in terms of inventory and counting there, all of our stuff has been incredibly low, and we've been mostly crossing our fingers just to make sure we get food in and changing menus. So it would be a very difficult audit this year as a result of COVID. Not that that's to say you shouldn't consider that one, but it was audited with the external audit in depth. So just to note.
Yeah, if I could jump in here and give you my 2 cents, and then I'll be quiet and see if anybody has a motion. Out of the 3 that Carl has outlined here, and looking at the balance of the others and where we've been, my preference would be purchasing AP and disbursements, but that's my preference as a member of the committee. I guess I'd like to hear any other comments or choices, and then we can go to making a motion and directing the internal auditors.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say earlier. I do appreciate Carl's 3 recommendations, but the one that I would also favor, along with you, Dan, us taking a more in-depth look at would be the purchasing and accounts payable.
Leslie or David, any thoughts or?
That seems to be, from Carl's description, the best choice.
Yeah,
from
I
the
agree
Description
too.
of the 3.
So can we have a motion to direct the internal auditors to, in their next cycle, review purchasing, AP, and disbursements? Does someone want to make that?
I'll make a
Pardon me?
motion.
Okay, David made the motion, and second.
I'll second.
And on the question, anything? Nothing? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passed. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Good. Thank you, everybody. Have a nice evening. I appreciate everybody attending.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.